Well, again, welcome. It's great to have you with us. I want to recognize some distinguished guests we have with us today. First and foremost, Medal of Honor recipient, Lieutenant General Retired Bob Foley. Bob, please stand. So great to have you here, and thank you so much. Former Secretaries of the Army, the Honorable Robert Speer and Patrick Murphy. Former recipients of the Marshall Medal, we have Sergeant Major of the Army, retired Ken Preston, who received it last year. Ken. And we're honored to have with us former Chiefs of Staff of the Army, General Retired Dennis Reimer, the 33rd Chief of Staff, and General Retired Eric Shinseki, the 34th Chief of Staff. And a special welcome to AUSA's former President and CEO, General Retired Carter Ham. Carter. He's going to be mad at me for that one, but that's okay. It's worth it. He deserves that. Former Sergeants Major of the Army, Jack Tilley, Ken Preston, Ray Chandler, and Dan Daly. Please stand. Well, the Military District of Washington, commanded by Major General Alan Pepin and his Command Sergeant Major Franklin Velez, has once again provided excellent support. So thank you, General Pepin, and your team for your contributions and success to this year's annual meeting. Also, a huge thank you to the Secretary of the Army and our Chief of Staff of Army for their incredible support. Thank you so much. It's just such an honor. Nothing like this happens without a lot of hard work, so a huge thank you to all the folks who've worked hard and tirelessly to make this 2022 annual meeting so successful. Thank you so much to all of you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today united in our love of country and the profession of arms, concerned about our nation's security and striving for peace in the world. We take inspiration from the high qualities of statesmanship and leadership present in the thoughts and actions of General of the Army George C. Marshall, to whose enduring memory this award we present today is dedicated. As we look back at some of the distinguished citizens who have received the Marshall Medal, we are encouraged by their example in guiding our nation through arduous times. People like Eisenhower, Bush, Powell, Scowcroft, Albright, and the American soldier. These recipients have distinguished themselves as presidents, statesmen, ambassadors, cabinet secretaries, generals, patriots, one and all. This year, we recognized a distinguished American, Elizabeth Dole, a former U.S. Senator, two-time Cabinet Secretary, former leader of the American Red Cross, and founder of a national organization that focuses on support for military families and caregivers. Her achievements demonstrate her lifelong commitment to service, made even more impressive by the fact that she was often among the first, if not the first, woman to hold the position. Elizabeth Dole, yes. Elizabeth Dole is a patriot who believes in the values that made this country great: courage, perseverance, generosity, faith, and a commitment to serve. It's my pleasure to present the highest honor of the association to the Honorable Elizabeth Dole.
Would Senator Dole and Mr. Rabeau please join General Brown on the stage? The Board of Directors of the Association of the United States Army hereby awards the George Catlett Marshall Medal to the Honorable Elizabeth Dole for selfless service to the United States of America throughout her extraordinary career and her tireless efforts to support service members and their families. Senator Dole served 6 years in the Senate after holding top administration jobs in the Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Bush administrations. When she served as Transportation Secretary, she had an impact on all our lives by bringing action to 3 major areas: mandatory seatbelts, airbags, and raising the drinking age to 21. Taken together, she has saved over 500,000 lives. She also spent 8 years as president of the American Red Cross, leading a major transformation in the way the organization collects, tests, and distributes the nation's blood supply. Senator Dole founded the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, dedicated to transforming how our nation supports the 5.5 million Americans caring for a wounded, injured, or ill service member or veteran at home. Inspired by her vision, the Foundation has successfully advocated for the largest expansion of military caregiver benefits in history, grown a national network of caregiver-friendly cities and counties, and created the most trusted online community of military caregivers. Recently, the Foundation worked with the White House's Joining Forces Program and Wounded Warrior Project to launch Hidden Helpers, an initiative benefiting the children of military caregivers. This year, the Foundation launched a financial assistance fund for struggling caregivers with the support of the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation. Elizabeth Dole has had a lasting impact on the United States, more than its current, former, and future soldiers and families will ever know. In awarding this medal, we recognize her for all that she has done, is doing, and will continue to do.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. What a privilege it is to be with all of you tonight. Thank you, General Brown, and everyone at AUSA for this tremendous honor, and for serving as the voice and champion of the greatest army the world has ever known. Yes. 10 months ago, I sadly lost my precious husband of 46 years. Bob had earned a number of titles in his life, but none filled him with as much pride as the title American Soldier. Yes. Now, that doesn't mean the Army was an immediate fit for Bob. Early on, he was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division, which was designed to fight on high mountain peaks in deep snow and in bitter temperatures. To fill its ranks, the Army recruited fur trappers, ski patrollers, woodsmen, forest rangers, and much to Bob's surprise, a young man from Kansas who had never seen a mountain up close. When Bob was deployed to Italy, fitting in didn't get any easier. His grizzled soldiers did not give him the warmest reception. Bob even saw a few men roll their eyes when he first introduced himself. The bright-eyed, impeccably dressed second lieutenant would have to prove his mettle, and that's exactly what Bob did. Rather than keep to his command tent, he ate with his soldiers and shared jokes. And when it came time to go out on patrol, he didn't position himself in the middle of the formation where it was safest. His NCO told him that that's where most officers stay. But Bob said, "No, I'll take point." Was he scared to do it? You bet. But Bob later explained, "I didn't know much about leadership at that time, but instinct told me that a leader had to be out front. He must be willing to endure the fire rather than hide from it or let somebody else take the brunt of the blows." Well, Bob truly lived up to that definition of a leader when, on April 14th, 1945, he led his platoon up the heavily mined slopes of Italy's Hill 913. As the worst scenes of war enveloped them, Bob reached out to retrieve his gravely injured radio man. In doing so, he suffered devastating wounds, which hospitalized him for 3 years and cost him the use of his right arm. How proud I was when in 2001, AUSA honored Bob with the Marshall Medal. Yes. Let me share with you the words of actor Tom Hanks, which touched my heart when he was speaking at the World War II Memorial earlier this year. How many structures in the nation's capital exist but for the efforts of one man? Hanks asked. The National World War II Memorial was built over 2 White House administrations with the financial contributions of Americans. But it was Bob Dole who willed this memorial into place. He pushed the idea, he corralled the votes, he made the phone calls, he enlisted allies, all of us, in the cause, and he raised the money. He did all but mix the concrete himself, which he may have done had he had the use of that right arm. Thank you. As Bob's partner in life and as a proud American who cherishes our freedoms, I am ever grateful for the generations of Americans who have joined Bob in wearing the Army uniform. And I so appreciate AUSA's dedicated work for the last 72 years. You have devoted yourselves to ensuring our country provides the Army the resources it needs, and that America gives our unwavering support, not only to the extraordinary men and women who volunteer to serve, but to their loved ones as well. For much of my life, I felt I understood the sacrifices made by military families. I was only a young girl during World War II, but my brother John was 13 years my senior and eligible to serve. When he was sent off to the Pacific aboard the Wyndham Bay, my mother constantly interrupted my radio programs to turn on the news in hopes of being reassured in some way about John. She made so many trips to the mailbox that I did my best to flood her with postcards when I went away to summer camp. It was just 12 years ago, however, when my eyes were first opened to the challenges of some very special military families. Bob was hospitalized at Walter Reed for 11 months, and I got to know the young spouses, mothers, dads, and siblings caring for their severely wounded warriors coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the caregivers I met was Jessica Allen. Her husband, Army Staff Sergeant Chaz Allen, had just been evacuated from Afghanistan after stepping on an IED. He lost both legs above the knees and suffered severe injuries to his right arm. Jessica decided to keep their young daughters at home until their dad could recover more. For 5 months, she flew back and forth between Tennessee and Washington, trying her best to be a wife, mom, and now a caregiver. Chaz remained hospitalized at Walter Reed for 16 months, while Jessica organized all of his care and began homeschooling their daughters so they could all stay by his side. After he was allowed to return home, Jessica coordinated the special adaptations to their house. She served as the lead parent and managed the unending medical appointments and paperwork. Even as Chaz's health has stabilized, his fused elbow means Jessica will always help him with shaving, buttoning his shirts, and pretty much anything requiring two hands. As I became invested in the lives of these caregivers, I began to believe that we were dealing with a new phenomenon in this country. Battlefield medicine was so improved that many who would have died in former wars were surviving, thank goodness. But of that group of survivors, so many came home with multiple wounds, illnesses, and injuries that required a caregiver for years, even decades. With less than 1% serving in the military, most Americans had no idea what was happening in military families. I knew we had to raise awareness and support, so I established the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. Thank you. Thank you. Our very first step was to commission the RAND Corporation to undertake comprehensive evidence-based research. RAND told us there are 5.5 million military caregivers in America, many bathing, feeding, dressing the severely wounded, handling medications, arranging doctor's appointments, and trying to prevent triggers that could set off an emotional response that can last for hours, all while raising kids and acting as the sole breadwinner for the family. America's military caregivers are essentially an unpaid workforce, providing $14 billion worth of care every year. But ladies and gentlemen, these extraordinary Americans never expected to serve as caregivers, and our nation has never prepared them, trained them, or provided them with adequate support. As a result, military caregivers report elevated rates of emotional anxiety, physical illness, and chronic pain, higher than those reported by civilian caregivers. Their time is often consumed with managing legal issues and applying for benefits. Frequently, they become socially isolated and experience strain within their families. During the last 10 years, our foundation has responded directly to these findings. We learned that respite is the caregiver's #1 need, so we created a respite relief program that provides a professional to step in and briefly care for the wounded warrior, to give that burned-out caregiver some relief. Our research uncovered gaps. Thank you. Our research uncovered gaps in benefits and resources, so we helped pass major legislation to vastly expand services and support across the Department of Veterans Affairs, DOD, and other agencies at the national, state, and local levels. Through Hidden Heroes Cities, we formed a network of almost 200 communities to offer caregivers resources and support right where they live. And because we knew government couldn't be the only solution, we built a coalition of more than 400 partners who have developed scores of new caregiver programs, including our most recent direct service, a financial relief fund, which is rescuing vulnerable caregivers from mounting bills and debt. Our foundation is also anticipating the challenges of the future. Our research tells us that one of the most alarming trends is the impact of caregiving on children in the home. 2.3 million children. These hidden helpers are not grown-ups who chose to serve their nation. They are children whose young lives have been suddenly interrupted and forever changed. Their innocence is lost as they watch their parent care for the types of wounds that only come from war. Their precious time with mom or dad is cut short. They miss out on their childhood, trading in the milestones and special moments to help with caregiving. Clearly, our mission remains urgent, and it will, well into the future. As former presidents of the American Red Cross, General Marshall and I both followed in the wake of Clara Barton, the angel of the battlefield, who once said, "You must never so much as think whether you like it or not, whether it is bearable or not. You must never think of anything except the need and how to meet it. In my foundation's first 10 years, we have created systems of caregiver support where none had existed. We have shown our nation that caring for those who have borne the battle must also include supporting those who care for them at home. And we have begun to weave caregivers into the fabric of our nation's appreciation of the military. The progress we've been proud to make is certainly a credit to the leadership of our CEO, Steve Schwab, and the amazing team that we're blessed to have carrying out our work. Though I also give credit to our foundation's philosophy that caring for our hidden heroes is not a Republican cause or a Democratic cause. It's not something for only the folks in Middle America to care about, or our friends along the coast, or all of us here in the Beltway. Our foundation intentionally chose to awaken the entire nation to the crisis facing caregivers, and I'm proud to say that the entire nation is responding. Unfortunately, this approach almost seems novel today, doesn't it? The voices of divisiveness seem to be drowning out the voices of compassion and unity. Rediscovering our national unity begins with regaining our trust in each other. President Truman, a Marshall Medal recipient, once said, "I grew up to look for the good in people. I've never regarded people with suspicion, for such an attitude usually leads to worrying yourself and to being a pessimist about everything, people included." Ladies and gentlemen, our nation has become too focused on artificial labels and differences, and we have allowed them to divide us. We must reverse this troubling tide. Yes. Yes. Right. Being in the presence of those who have worn the Army uniform always gives me hope that the seeds of unity and service remain fertile in America. As General Marshall asserted in the aftermath of World War II, "It is to you men and women of this great citizen army who carried this nation to victory that we must look to for leadership in the critical years ahead." How right he was. For nearly 2.5 centuries, the United States Army has been a sterling example of the unity that flourishes and the greatness that can be achieved when proud Americans commit themselves to service. With every young American who pledges an oath to our nation, with every soldier who summons the courage to face grave threats or bring comfort to scenes of disaster, with every Army family who provides unending support to their soldier and serves as their caregiver, I see the majesty of our beloved nation and our capacity and strength for overcoming the seemingly impossible. May God bless the American soldier and each of you, and may he continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.